Hi everyone, welcome to Here We Are, Brattleboro's community talk show. I'm Wendy O'Connell, and I've lived in the area for almost 40 years, which is kind of hard to believe, but it's true. And I was thinking that it would be really fun to have conversations with people in the Brattleboro area, the people who have lived here, the people who make Brattleboro the vibrant and fun community that it is. And so here we are today with some people in the Brattleboro area, Ruth Rodriguez and Jeremy Sowell. And they have just started a new bookstore in Putney, and it's called Antidote Books. And so we're really happy to have you here today. Thank you both so much for coming. As far as a little intro goes, I just have to say that when I walked into to Antidote Books for the first time, they were just getting going, and they were setting up the new space, and it was being renovated. And then a few weeks later, I walked in, and it was, I think, grand opening night, which was pretty fabulous. They had some poets coming in to do some readings. And there's a feeling that you walk in the store, it's so sweet and it's so welcoming. And they've made a space that is so conducive to just going in and hanging out, sitting down with a book. And I got that feeling when I sat there myself and just looked around. It was almost a kind of a primal feeling, the way you feel when you look at rows and rows of books and you see that each one of them has a story to tell. And each one of them can take you on an adventure. And that was something that I hadn't felt in a while in that kind of way that I did, I think, even when I was a kid. So I'm so happy to have Antidote in our community. And it's a really wonderful place. I hope you all get a chance to go up there to Putney. It's right on Main Street in Putney. So, but we're going to start with talking to both Ruth and Jeremy about how they got here. You both grew up and came from Houston, Texas, which is really, really far away. And you came really way north to Vermont, where the climate is totally different and the geography is different and the people are different. So if you'd like to just start talking a little bit about what it was like down there, what kind of lives you were living then, and what brought you up here.
Well, as far as lives, I went to a couple of different colleges there. I was kind of had wanderlust for a while. But I was always working in books, and I did that for about 12 or 14 years, I guess, before we moved here. But I guess that was kind of my life, just college and books. Mm-hmm. So mm-hmm. It wasn't. Yeah, music, of course.
Music, yeah. And you were in a real urban area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And Ruth?
I grew up in the inner city in Houston on the East End, so predominantly Hispanic neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And, you know, as I grew up in Houston, I was always aware of how diverse it was there. Mm-hmm. So part of the reason why I wanted to move here was because I wanted a different kind of experience, and I wanted to live in a different kind of landscape other than the city landscape. Mm-hmm. So
you forgot it.
I did. I
did. And so I would think to go from a very vibrant, multicultural, very diverse community, more than a community, many communities in an urban area like that, and to come up here. And when you first got here, you were in Saxons River?
We were, for a period.
Right. Mm-hmm. So what was your first year like? I mean, you weathered a couple storms, real storms. You had some snow.
I'll speak for Ruth on this one. She, I don't think she had any idea that what would normally be a city block in Houston was the population of 10 square miles. And I was used to it because for about 10 years when I was a kid, we lived out in the country. And so it didn't feel strange to me, really. I enjoyed just going out our back door and going to the river. But and she liked it too, but it was amazing to her that she couldn't step out of her door and find a restaurant or a place to go shopping or a grocery store or anything that she was used to, because you could just get on a bus or a train and be there in 2 minutes, 5 minutes. And here it was, you had to travel a town over or 2 towns or to Massachusetts.
Yes, right,
So,
right, yeah.
I
yeah.
did adapt pretty quickly, however. There was something that I was really drawn to in the quietude of the landscape, and something I started to appreciate, the mountains, the greenery, stuff that I had never experienced before.
Yeah.
And just being able to walk outside and walk up a hill and, you know, experience nature
Yes.
in that way.
And I bet the air was a bit different as well, coming from an urban area to here.
Yes, you know, people always ask why I decided to move to Vermont, and I think part of it had to do with the fact that I grew up in one of the most polluted neighborhoods in the United States.
Wow.
So I think that was kind of something I wasn't necessarily thinking about, but I think that was part of the reason why we're still here today. When we go back home, there, you know, I absolutely love the city. I love Houston, but you kind of worry sometimes about the air you're breathing, the water you're drinking, the chemical plants
Yeah.
in your neighborhood and things like that.
Yeah.
So
And you realize that everything smells really badly.
Really?
When we
Do
go
you
home.
notice that when you go back?
Yeah, I do now. When I lived there, I never really noticed it. But when you go back, you
Yeah.
get off the plane, and you're like, it
Yeah.
smells here.
So
So
you
I
have to-
even, yeah.
You have to
sorry.
shift gears
Yeah.
going back.
Even if you go to like New York City,
Oh, yeah.
I'll walk around the whole first like 2 days. I'm like, it smells so bad here.
Uh-huh.
And then you get used to it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's hard.
It's true.
Yeah.
well, I do have a big family, and being here and far away from my family is something that's really hard for me. My dad came to visit to help us build the store out in April, and this was his first time coming to Vermont. And he noted that he was always curious about why I moved here and what was Vermont, like what was that all about. And once he came and stayed for a while, he told me, he was like, I realize you're exactly where you need to be.
Wow.
And this was something that I hadn't maybe thought of or figured out for myself.
Ah.
But my dad, he knows something about that.
He could
so
see that in
he
you.
could
That's
see
really
it.
wonderful. That's a big endorsement.
It is.
One thing, as I said, you know, my impressions of walking into the bookstore and how I felt in there, how it made me feel, made me think of, you know, the early memories that we have of books, the early memories that we have of either being read to or sitting down in our own space and being able to have this thing in front of us that is where we are. You know, it's not an interactive thing. We have to sit there and be with it. And I'm just curious, you know, because I know that you both have a real love of books, and I'm wondering about your early experiences with books.
Oh, my turn.
Yeah, having two people, you guys get to trade off a little
Right.
bit.
Okay. I have, both of my parents worked a lot, and so I was left with basically a trove of books all the time as my babysitter. And I was kind of semi-raised by, I guess, authors. I would go through periods where I was reading different genres, different types of books all the time. Just there was a flea market about 15 miles out of town, and my mom would want to go on Sunday because they had trading days. And so we would go, and the best thing about the flea market was the indoor section, where there was an antiquarian bookseller, but he also had, you know, kind of modern stuff, I guess. And I would load up. She would let me stay in there for 3 or 4 hours. And every weekend I would get the 25-cent and 50-cent books. And I would come out of there with a paper sack full of bags. I was allowed to have $10, which meant I could get.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was a lot.
So if I could, you know, do the quarter books, then I could really rack up. I would
Yeah.
have 20 or 30 books. So, you know, the 50 cents would slow me down a little bit. Yeah, I would load up on books, and that was, I would just read them all the time. Because if the weather was bad, it rained a lot in the part of Texas I lived in the coast. And so, since my parents weren't home too often, and in junior high, it was such a small school where I was out in the sticks that we didn't have a lot of extracurricular activities. So for about 4 or 5 years, all I did was read.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I would play outside when I could, but yeah.
That's a background. Yeah, that does establish something. you
Yeah,
know.
so.
They become friends as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my companions.
Yes, yes, definitely. Ruth is a poet, and I know that words mean a lot to you. And I'm wondering, you know, I mean, Jeremy's experience of going and, you know, introducing himself to a whole new bunch of friends. You know, I can see how you could be introducing yourself to a lot of new words or a lot of new phrasing.
I think for me, the draw came way later. Even, you know, maybe the earliest experience that I can remember was probably maybe around 12 years old. And no one ever really monitored what I read, or, you know, there was never that push to interact with that world. But when I did stumble across certain texts, I knew that I was probably reading things that I shouldn't have been reading at the time. And it excited me, though, because I started to understand how characters could be very complex. And I figured people must be too. There must be a bunch of secrets. So I think it was more of drawing the curtain back for me and realizing there are very complex relationships within family dynamics, and I learned that through novels.
Interesting. That's really interesting. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that we pick up so much that we don't even realize just by reading. We were talking earlier about words, you know, that we read and we mispronounce to ourselves and then find out it's pronounced completely differently, but you realize, you know, you're living in your own world. And Jeremy, you talked about working at this really interesting bookstore in Houston that I had never heard of. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was a place called Half Price Books, and it was, you know, mostly used books, and it was owned by a socialist. So she distributed all the profit amongst the employees. We all got health care if we worked there. It was free health care. Well, not free. She paid for it. But it was a great environment. You know, it was a small chain of used bookstores, and the owner and the board of directors, because I think it was like 40 stores at the time, so they had a board. But they just made sure that even the employee that got hired a month earlier was taken care of just as much as the person who'd been there for 20 years.
And this was a used bookstore, primarily used bookstore. So did you ever find any treasures? Because you would just get things coming from various places, right? Yeah,
so people would, since the bookstore was in the heart of downtown Houston pretty much. So we would get, you know, strange things. I remember once we got a collection of books that had Polaroids in them of a gentleman trying on different clothing and outfits, or about 150 different outfits, Polaroids, and they were everything from bunny suits to, you know, just boas. That was kind of crazy. But then we would get strange texts. You know, we got, I think it was early 1500s treatise against the Pope. It was printed in Amsterdam.
Wow.
It was an incunabula text that I couldn't even find other references to it when I researched it, so we ended up donating that one to the Museum of Printing History.
Wow, that was a generous donation.
Yeah, well, the Museum of Printing History in Houston is really good. It was a nonprofit, and I mean, it is what it sounds like. And they have tours for the schools every Tuesday and Friday, I think. So children can go in, and it's for elementary and middle school. They have docents that lead them through the whole museum and tell them about how the written word came about.
I'm thinking of you in terms of the bookstore you have now, because Antidote is both new and used books. So you've got a lot of the bestsellers that you've chosen. You do a pretty thorough job of curating what you have in that store. But again, you're in the same kind of position where you have books coming in, or you go out and scout for used books as well. And so you're finding things all the time. And I know that you made mention of a collection that you came into recently.
Yes, we recently acquired a person from the community, their library. One of the things that was exciting for me was this person's marginalia. So it was, when you look at these books, you are interacting and engaging with a mind that's engaging with another mind. And so, you know, yeah, his marginalia was amazing and is amazing. And one of the sad things for me was knowing that this whole collection of work will be broken up, you know, into various people. But everything from jazz to theology, poetry, and you can see the mind working throughout all of those texts very carefully. And, you know, there's so much personality in them too. Like, I think there was even a running tally of great jazz artists at like 143, just like a tally. So it was just really cool seeing what this person was interested in. And it did happen that the person who owned this collection was one of the previous owners of the Victorian home that is now part of the bookstore.
That's really interesting. Yeah, that's a discovery, and I love your description of that. You know, because you've got a couple things going on at the same time when you're looking through that book, getting two kinds of history or two kinds of story, and really going more deeply into the whole thing. That's a wonderful experience.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It is. And you know, so much of books is about, you know, connection, you know, our connection to the books or to the characters. But again, this next one, and used books, there's something about used books and knowing that other people have either, you know, just had them on their shelves or have had whole experiences with them, and these stories that live on and on and on, you know, so you have another whole layer there.
And one of the things that it makes me think about, you know, one person once told me, you know, if you write something, you know, say you write a poem, and you intend certain words to mean certain things, they will mean different things to different people because language, words are so old. So even throughout centuries, words shape shift, and that just comes to mind when we're thinking about these texts. You know, they mean different things to different people at different times.
Right.
So
and looking at it through the lens of a different culture too. You know, if you're looking at something that's, you know, 700 years old that you uncovered, you know, and to realize it was still the human hand, you know, that was creating these things. Yeah. And I love a phrase that you used, which is books are like lifelines for us.
Yeah, I really believe that part of my engagement with work is, you know, I'm most drawn to that which I feel I need. And at times words, they can really, you know, do good things for the interior self. And some days you might come across something and it can, you know, change the way you feel. And it could really, you know, in a sense, I do feel that they are lifelines. So
I think a lot of us feel that way, you know, whether it's a storyline that you're following, you know, or a theme or history, you know, yeah, they play a big part. And so since you've been in Putney and you've been open just a few months now, but you have had people from different communities coming through, stopping through.
We have had a person from Peterborough, which is
pretty far. Just about an hour. Yep.
Yes, they've been to the store, you know, I want to say 3 or 4 times. Actually, that person sent me a book in the mail.
Oh, wow.
I didn't think about that. But yes, they sent me a book on yoga philosophy, which was really interesting. And we've had people come from out of town, from Boston, people from Brattleboro, people from Bellows Falls, people from Westminster West, people from Saxons River. So I hope I'm not leaving anyone out, but...
We had a family from Newfane in 2 days ago.
Yeah.
All the way from Newfane.
All the way from Newfane, over the hill, over the hill.
People from the Bronx, and so it's so nice to have a place where, you know, we are on that, you know, smaller thoroughfare, but, you know, we get passersby from everywhere.
Yeah. Well, I think too that you know, especially this time of year, there are a lot of tourists coming through, and I think a lot of people really do kind of map out what they're going to be doing here. There's the Apple Pie Festival, there's obviously the foliage, there's all kinds of things going on. But like we all do, if you're going to an area, you know, there you get your favorite places, and it's wonderful to be one of those places. It's a great, not only is it a great endorsement, but it's saying a lot about what you guys have created there.
Yes,
already.
We had a couple who came up from Northampton, and you know, the woman she runs her own smaller press, and you know, she'd been coming up when we were doing the construction, and she was back the other night, and she said, "You're finally open," and she walked around. She made comments about, you know, I could hear her just like noting every section that she walked through, and yeah, she wants to eventually sell some of her publications through our bookstore, but it's someone from Northampton, so.
Yeah, what is your relationship with that? Do you think that you'll be selling small press items there? You already are a little bit with poetry, aren't you?
We are. We're selling works by smaller presses, and we're working with Small Press Distribution. They're a nonprofit. They give more of a percentage back to the writer or artist. I think that it's really important to consider and carry books from emerging voices or people who do work with something that seems, you know, very alive and of the moment. So,
yeah, it's great, and because they're well, you know, I think that this is watching the trend in independent bookstores has been really interesting over the last 15 years or so, because with the big things like Amazon coming in, you know, so many people are going that direction, but I've seen it come full circle, and I know that this is a national trend as well, is that there are more and more independent stores that are opening up, like you guys, you know, and getting a following, and a lot of it is just being able to have a relationship with either the people who are running it or the collection itself. You know, you have your favorite, there's like City Lights Bookstore in San Francisco, you know, you kind of know what that's going to be about. And there are many of those around the country that have kept up and running, for one thing, but the new ones are what's really encouraging. And for people your age also, to be able to start out and have it be a viable business is really exciting, especially in our area. That's what we need. We need more and more of that. And how have you done with, obviously you've been getting a lot of community support, and for you, how has that been in terms of the support for the store, but also for you and your connection with the people in the community?
The community support is, I mean, it's the most vital thing in the store. I mean, because you can't, like books, like we were saying, it's like a conversation. There's no conversation if it's only one-sided. So the fact that so many people have come into our store, and even outside of the store, just told us how great they think it is and how much they appreciate it, it's meant everything.
Yeah, that's great.
one of the things I was thinking about was when we were still in the construction process for the inside of the store, you know, people would come in and, you know, make comments about what they wanted that space to be. And I was really struck by one gentleman who came in, and we had a talk about, he was just basically saying that we needed a place in Putney where the migrant workers could integrate into the community, because they don't necessarily have a place to gather and talk about food justice and just have a place to be as part of the community. And I never, you know, really thought to imagine that it could be something else for other people, rather than just a place where, you know, we can read books and purchase books, but a place for healing for some people.
Yes.
So I think that that is one of the things that we did not expect.
Yeah.
And we're welcoming that.
That's wonderful. That's really great. It's a wonderful point. It's great. The Literary Festival is coming up, and you guys are going to be involved, which is pretty exciting.
We will. We will sell the poetry at the poetry events.
Excellent.
So Major Jackson will read, David Tomas Martinez, Nicole Seeley, Nicole Seeley just came out with Ordinary Beast, her first collection, full-length collection of poems, and NPR basically named that as their most anticipated poetry book for 2017.
Oh, that's great.
So it's so amazing that we're going to have such vibrant poets coming through the area, and recognizing those voices that are embedded in that community. Major Jackson.
Yes, yeah. Carolyn Forche is another one who's coming. Yeah, I read the list. It's pretty impressive.
Charles Simic.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Yeah. And it seems like, maybe it's just me and my awareness has shifted, but I noticed that there's more interest in poetry lately in general, and it seems like there are more publications coming out. And I just wonder what kind of a commentary that is on our culture. I think it's sort of an antidote to screen time and to fast novels and books as a commodity. It's something that you have to really sit with and be more thoughtful about.
That's actually where part of our name came from.
Well, I was leading into that.
The antidote for the age of technology.
Oh, yeah?
For the age of, people being bored quickly. So, I mean, not that it's anything new, but, we definitely have to be in a space where we can kind of unwind from the smart world.
Right. That's funny. I didn't even have that as a lead-in, but it worked really well. I'm glad. Yeah, that's great. And so in terms of also the community, well, there are two things. One is that I want to talk about is that you've initiated a little bit of a business potluck for some of your friends who are also in business.
Oh, yes. Well, that was, I think, before Antidote Books. I don't know if that was necessarily true, but, we just have friends who have businesses, and, a lot of people around here love potlucks. They love doing potlucks. And for us, we are, interested in having a potluck at a later hour so that people who run businesses can show up, and so that we can unwind from the day to day of running your own business and just kind of uplift each other and, be still part of like a community in that right of being, a younger business owner in the area.
Yeah, because even though you guys can go out and scout, and find old books and go into homes that are divesting their collections, you're still pretty much at that store in one way or another, 10 to 7 every day, right? Is it 7 days a week?
Yeah.
7 days a week.
That's pretty much most of your time, right?
Yeah,
there,
one of us
right?
is always there.
Yeah. So the last thing I did want to mention is you're going to be participating in Small Business Saturday, which is coming up in November.
November 25th.
November 25th. So that's the Thanksgiving Day weekend, which coincides with the craft tour in Putney as well, right?
We'll have a puppet show.
Oh, nice.
It's adapted from the book The Last Stop on Market Street. And one of the puppet artists, he lives in Connecticut. He'll be coming to Vermont. His name's Caleb Martinez, and he's incredibly talented. We are extremely honored that he'll spend the day performing the toy puppet theater piece. It's about 15 to 20 minutes. It'll take place several times throughout Small Business Saturday. It'll be free, and we just really want people to come in and interact with this performance, because I think that it speaks to really important things, diversity and growing up, with some trials and hardships and stuff like that.
And that's for all ages too.
That's for all ages.
For all ages.
And,
that's great.
So a little bit back to the Brattleboro Literary Fest weekend, we will have a reading at our store. It's not associated with the Brattleboro Literary Festival, but we are doing something on Saturday and Sunday evening.
Like an after hours thing, I guess.
Yeah, it's
after hours.
Yeah, it's unofficial. It's not an official event for the Literary Festival, but it's something that we wanted to do. And one of the events will specifically be for Latinx writers. So
for what?
Latinx.
Which is?
And, well, basically we'll have a group of female writers from different cultures. And yeah, we're just looking for, to thread together this event with female writers.
Oh, that's excellent. That's great.
You know, I think it's important anytime you have a group of women writers of color who get together to read their work and have a platform for that. So
That's great. That's great. Well, this is all really exciting stuff. It's all new. It's all exciting. Again, Antidote is just a sweet little bookstore. It's so worth a trip up to Putney to check it out. And obviously, with all these events, I think you're going to have a lot of people coming. And I'm so glad to have you on the show. It was really great to have you both.
thank you, Wendy.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking us to
Oh,
be on.
you're so welcome. It was lovely. And it's just great that there's a new viable bookstore, independent, in our area.
And we are really excited about all of the endeavors that are happening and the ones that are keeping us here. So, you know, there's so many people who've inspired us since we've been in Vermont. And, you know, we know a younger couple who moved here from Miami, and they're opening up a beer garden in Bellas Falls. And, you know, we have a friend who moved up from Long Island, and he has a thriving antique business in Bellas Falls. And one of my best friends that now, since I moved to Vermont, she's an artist, and her name is Michelle Rattay. She's from Saxons River, and the work that she creates, some part of that keeps me here.
That's so great. That's so great. Not to mention all of the kids who are back on the farms or starting their own farms and CSAs and all of that stuff. No, it's very exciting. It's exciting for all of us. So thanks again. Thanks for being
so much,
here.
Wendy.
Yeah,
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you all in the audience for being here with us today, too. It's exciting to hear about these new things that are going on. And again, we do have the Literary Festival that's coming up real soon, so stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for our next show. Here We Are is going to be a weekly show, so you can check the local schedules. You can always find us on Facebook and on our website. Thank you. Thanks for being here.